Jordan Peterson became famous for telling people to clean their room, but the room was never the real subject. The room was just the smallest place where chaos could be seen. A desk covered in trash, a bed that was never made, a life that had become so disoriented that the person living inside it no longer knew where to begin. So Peterson gave people a beginning, not a dream, not a shortcut, not a soft little message about loving yourself. A beginning. Clean your room, tell the truth, stand up straight, take responsibility. Do not let resentment turn you into something ugly. And for millions of people, especially young men, this did not feel like advice. It felt like someone had finally walked into the ruins and said, "Start here." That was the strange power of Jordan Peterson. He did not promise people happiness. He almost seemed suspicious of happiness. He talked about life like if it was tragic by nature, like suffering was not a glitch in the system, but the system itself. And if life was suffering, then the question was not, how do I avoid pain? The question was, what can I build inside myself that pain cannot completely destroy? That was the message: meaning over pleasure, responsibility over comfort, truth over delusion, order over chaos. And for a while, it made Peterson look almost prolific. A professor became a symbol. A psychologist became a public intellectual. A man sitting in lecture halls talking about mythology, religion, personality, evil, and responsibility became one of the most influential voices on the internet. His official biography describes him as a psychologist, author, online educator, and professor emeritus at the University of Toronto. It also says his books, including Maps of Meaning, 12 Rules of Life, and Beyond Order, have sold more than 7 million copies. But numbers do not fully explain why he mattered. There are many successful authors, many professors, and there are many public speakers. Peterson became something else because he entered the culture at the exact moment people were quietly falling apart. A lot of people were connected to everyone and close to no one. They had infinite information and no direction. They had freedom, but no structure. They had opinions, but no foundation. They had entertainment, but no meaning. And Peterson's voice cut through that, not because it was calm, because it was urgent. He spoke like a man who believed the soul could decay if it did not have something heavy enough to carry. That is why people listened. He made responsibility sound heroic. He made discipline sound spiritual. He made suffering sound like it could be used. And in a world where everything becoming easier, faster, emptier, and more ironic, he told people something almost ancient. Your life is not supposed to be easy. It's supposed to mean something. That message built an empire. Books, lectures, tours, podcasts, YouTube, Peterson Academy, Daily Wire. In 2022, Daily Wire announced a major multi-year deal with Peterson involving his podcast, including exclusive content and subscriber specials. Peterson Academy now presents itself as an online education platform. His public work became bigger than a personal brand. It became an institution around the idea that lost people could still be educated, shaped, and rescued from chaos. So by every visible measurement, Peterson won. He became rich, famous, powerful. He became the man millions of people looked at when their own lives felt unlivable. But this is where the story turns, because success is very good at changing how life looks on the outside. It is not always very good at changing what a life feels like from the inside. And Jordan Peterson's life has become one of the clearest examples of that. There are many online estimates about his net worth, but the exact number is not publicly verified. What is public is that Peterson and his family have been tied to more than $50 million in Arizona real estate transactions over the past couple years, according to ABC 15 and the Phoenix Business Journal. And the details matter not because wealth makes him evil, not because owning expensive property means someone has failed morally. That would be too simple. It matters because of the contrast. A man teaching meaning, a man teaches responsibility, a man teaches people that money, comfort, pleasure, and status are not enough. Then that same man becomes wealthy enough to live inside a version of success most people will never touch. And still, the suffering finds him. That is the part people do not like to look at, because most people are secretly living on the belief that success will finally quiet them. When I get money, or at least enough money, I'll be calm. When I get enough recognition, I'll be real. When I get the house, the audience, the respect, the relationship, the body, the status, then something inside me will finally stop aching. But Peterson's story interrupts that fantasy, because a bigger house does not mean a quieter mind. A larger audience does not mean a less lonely room. More money does not make the body obey you. More status does not stop the nervous system from becoming a prison. And this is what makes the current chapter of his life so unsettling. The man who spent years explaining suffering to millions is now reportedly living through a level of suffering that none of his success can simply remove. Peterson's health struggles have been public for years. He has spoken before severe problems connected to certain drug dependencies and withdrawals. More recently, his family said that he has been suffering from a serious neurological condition involving akathisia, a condition associated with extreme restlessness, distress, and pain. In April 2026, his daughter said he had been suffering from an old neurological injury causing the disease, describing the experience as hellish for the family. In May 2026, his wife Tammy said he was at home very sick still, with mornings that were brutally painful. Only some relief later in that day. She also pushed back against rumors that reduced the story to simple luxury estate narratives. So the accurate story is not Jordan Peterson is depressed in a mansion. That's just not morally correct to say. It's also cheap. The accurate story is stranger and actually tragic. Jordan Peterson, one of the most famous voices of meaning, order, and responsibility, is reportedly seriously unwell, mostly away from the public life and living through pain that his family says has taken him out of the world he once dominated. That is not gossip. That is human reversal. That is a human and a man whose family speaks because he often cannot. A man who once filled lecture halls with words about suffering, now trapped inside a suffering that words may not reach. And this is where people become cruel, because the internet does not know how to watch a complicated person suffer. It only knows how to turn suffering into evidence. If you hate him, his pain becomes proof that he was a fraud. If you love him, his pain becomes proof that he was a martyr. But both reactions are too easy. They protect people from seeing the actual human being. The real story is not that Peterson was wrong, and it's not that Peterson was right. The real story is that no philosophy can make a person untouchable. That is the part nobody wants. We want the teacher to stand above the lesson. We want the therapist who never breaks, the philosopher who never doubts, the strong man who never collapses, and a professor of meaning who never loses his peace. But life does not respect the role we perform for others. The body does not care what people think you represent. Pain does not ask how many books you sold. Illness does not check your subscriber count. The nervous system does not become obedient because you once explained the dragon. And maybe that is why Peterson's story feels so heavy, at least to me, because the chaos did not become from a place everyone expected. It did not come through some debate, did not come through a political enemy or through cancellation. It came through the body, through medication, withdrawal, neurological pain, the private machinery of being alive. The one place no one can fully intellectualize their way out of. And in that sense, Peterson has become an example of the very thing he spent his life describing. Life is tragic, suffering is real, meaning matters, but meaning does not delete pain. Meaning does not make the body harmless. Meaning does not guarantee peace. It only gives a person a reason to keep holding on when peace is not available. That is a much darker idea than self-help. Self-help teaches people do the right thing and your life will become beautiful. Peterson's deeper message was never really that. His deeper message was do the right thing because life may not become beautiful. Do them because chaos is real. Do them because suffering is coming. Do them because if you do not have meaning when the suffering arrives, resentment will be waiting for you. And maybe that is the most honest way to look at him now. Not as a fallen guru, not as a perfect man or a victim or a villain, but as a person who became famous for warning people about the storm and then found himself inside one. There is something almost biblical about that. A man studies chaos, a man lectures on chaos, a man builds wealth by teaching people how to create order, then chaos enters the one place order cannot fully control, his own body. It is a tragedy, and tragedy is deeper than punishment. Tragedy is when a person discovers that even the truth does not make life easy. It only makes life harder to lie about. And Peterson, for all his flaws, all his controversy, all his intensity, understood something most modern culture tries to avoid. Human beings are not built to live on pleasure alone. We need meaning. We need structure. We need something sacred enough to live for. But his current suffering adds another layer to that idea, because maybe meaning is not a cure. Maybe meaning is not the thing that saves you from pain. Maybe meaning is just the thing that keeps you from becoming completely empty when pain is still there. And that is a very different kind of hope. Not soft hope, not motivational hope, not the kind of hope that says everything is going to be okay. A harder hope, the kind that says even if everything is not okay, you still have to decide what kind of person you're going to be inside of it. That is why his story matters. Because it's not really about Jordan Peterson's mansion. It's not really about his money. It's not even about his illness. It's about the illusion that if a person becomes successful enough, intelligent enough, disciplined enough, famous enough, wealthy, they can finally escape the basic terms of being human. But nobody escapes. Not the poor, not the rich, not the unknown or the famous or the student or the professor, not the man with 7 million books sold, not the man with 1 million people listening, not even Jordan Peterson. And maybe that is the final contradiction of his life so far. He taught people that meaning was stronger than pleasure, and he may have been right, but now his story shows something more complicated. Meaning may be stronger than pleasure. It may last longer than money. It may reach places success never touches. But meaning is not magic. It doesn't make the body indestructible, doesn't stop illness from entering the room, or doesn't stop the nervous system from erasing its past. It also doesn't remove the strange vulnerability of being human. And this is where Jordan Peterson's story becomes more than a story. Maybe after everything, the real lesson is that meaning keeps you from becoming empty, while pain is still there. Not peace, not comfort, not victory, something harder. A reason to stay honest, a reason to stay human, a reason to keep breathing when life stops feeling like something you can't explain. And in the end, that might be the most serious thing Jordan Peterson ever showed us. Not a lecture, not a rule, not through a debate, but through the painful fact that even the man who taught meaning still had to suffer like everyone else. And maybe that's the part of Jordan Peterson's story worth holding on to. Not the controversy, not the money or the headlines, not the way the internet turns every human being into a side to argue for or against, but the quieter truth underneath it all. A person who can spend their entire life studying, suffering, and still suffer. A person can teach meaning and still need meaning. A person could help millions of people stand up straighter and still have days where standing up feels impossible. And that does not make the message worthless. It makes it real, because meaning was never supposed to turn us into machines. It was never supposed to make us untouchable. It was never supposed to remove pain from life completely. Meaning is not the absence of suffering. Meaning is what keeps suffering from becoming the whole story. And maybe that is the lesson people miss. We do not need perfect teachers. We need honest reminders. We need to remember that no amount of success makes someone less human. No amount of intelligence makes someone immune to pain. No amount of wealth can replace peace, and no public image is ever the full truth of a private life. So whether you agree with Jordan Peterson or not, his story leaves behind a question that is bigger than him. What are you building that can still matter when life gets hard? Not when everything is going right, not when people are clapping, not when the numbers are growing, not when the world finally sees you, but when the room is quiet, when nobody's impressed, when the pain is real, when the version of yourself you depended on no longer works. That is where meaning becomes more than an idea. That is where it becomes a decision to stay honest, to stay kind, to keep going, to let pain deepen you without letting it destroy you. And maybe that is the most positive truth in all of this. We are not saved by becoming untouchable. We are saved little by refusing to become empty, by finding one thing worth caring, one person worth loving, one responsibility worth honoring, one truth worth telling, one small piece of order we can still create in front of us. Because sometimes a life does not change all at once. Sometimes it begins again in the smallest possible way. A room cleaned, A sentence told honestly, a phone call made, a morning survived, a burden carried without turning bitter. And if Jordan Peterson's story teaches anything, maybe it's this. Meaning does not promise that life will stop hurting. It promises that the hurt does not have to be meaningless. And for anyone who has ever felt lost, broken, ashamed, exhausted, or afraid that their life has gone too far off course, that still matters. Because as long as meaning is possible, a person is not finished. Not when they fall, not when they suffer, not when the world misunderstands them, not when they no longer recognize the life they built. There is still a way back, not always the same life, not always the same version of yourself, but back to something honest, something human, something worth staying for. And maybe that is where the story should end. Not with a man trapped by suffering, but with the reminder that even inside suffering, meaning can still be found. Not an escape, but as a light, small, imperfect, sometimes barely visible, but still enough to walk forward.